Why is the whole room dirty by this time of the night?
I will do it later.
Why is there no food on the table?
I was not in the mood to cook.
Did you just say you were not in the mood?
Yes. Take some water from the fridge and drink.
This is the story of Cynthia, a woman who ignored every sign until something heavy struck. Before we continue, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far our story has traveled. Now, let's get started. Cynthia and Daniel had been married for 3 years. To anyone watching from outside, they looked like a couple building something good, a modest house in a quiet estate, a husband who worked hard at a logistics company in town, and a wife who, in the early days, had shown promise. But somewhere along the line, comfort had crept in and settled where effort used to be. Daniel worked long hours, sometimes returning home too tired to even speak. He never complained about it. He loved his job. And more than that, he loved the idea of the home he was building for his family. What he didn't expect was that the home he worked so hard for would be the one place where nobody worked as hard as he did. Cynthia had grown comfortable, not comfortable in the way that brings peace, comfortable in the way that breeds neglect. The cooking, the sweeping, the laundry, these things had quietly become Daniel's unspoken responsibility, not because he demanded rest from her, but because she simply wouldn't rise to meet them. "I'll do it later," was her favorite sentence. Later never came. "There's still time," she'd say, watching a movie while dust gathered on the shelves. "I'm not in the mood," she'd sigh, scrolling through her phone while Daniel's stomach growled from hunger after a 9-hour shift. And so, night after night, Daniel would come home to a cold kitchen and a colder welcome. He'd quietly tie a wrapper around his waist, pick up the broom, and sweep the room himself. He'd light the stove and cook a simple meal for the both of them. He never raised his voice. He never raised a hand. He told himself, she will change with time. Marriage takes patience. But patience, when it is never met halfway, begins to wear thin. At the office, Daniel worked closely with a colleague named Maya. She was calm, attentive, the kind of person who noticed the small things, the tiredness behind his eyes, the way he sometimes stared blankly at his desk before snapping back to his tasks. "You look worn out lately," Maya said one afternoon, dropping a cup of tea on his desk without being asked. Daniel managed a tired smile. "Just home stress. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. And Maya, without meaning to, became the first person in a long time who made him feel like his effort was seen. It started small. A dinner invite after a long project meeting. "It's late. You haven't eaten. My place is closer than fighting traffic home." Daniel hesitated, but hunger and exhaustion made the decision for him. He called Cynthia. "I'll be staying back at the office." "Okay," she said flatly, already reaching for the remote. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask when he'd be back. If anything, there was relief in her voice, more time with her phone, her shows, her silence. Daniel noticed that too, and it hurt more than she would ever know. The nights at Maya's became more frequent. Nothing had happened between them that Daniel could call a betrayal, not yet, but he found himself smiling at his phone late into the night, replying to her messages long after Cynthia had fallen asleep, untouched by curiosity, undisturbed by suspicion. One morning, Daniel jumped out of bed, dressed quickly, and rushed off to work without a word. He didn't ask about breakfast. He didn't mention the unswept floor. He simply left like a man who no longer expected anything from the house he was walking out of. Cynthia noticed the silence, but she brushed it off. "Maybe he's just busy," she told herself, sinking back into her phone. It was days before discomfort crept in. Cynthia sat in the parlor one evening, surrounded by dust she hadn't cleared in over a week, stomach growling because there was no one left to cook for her. She picked up her phone and called Daniel. Where are you? When are you coming home? I'm staying back at the office, came the flat reply. The same words she had once said without care. She dropped the phone, unsettled but unwilling to admit why. The next day, driven by a mix of hunger and suspicion, she followed him quietly, carefully, until she found herself standing outside a quiet hotel restaurant. Through the glass, she saw them, Daniel and Maya, seated across from each other, laughing over a candle-lit dinner, comfortable in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be with him in years. Something inside her cracked. She stormed in. "Daniel, so this is what you've been doing? Cheating on me?" The restaurant went quiet. Daniel stood up slowly, no anger in his eyes, only tiredness, and something like grief. "Cynthia," he said, his voice steady, "I didn't leave you today. I left the day you decided love alone was enough to keep a home standing. I cooked, I cleaned, I waited. I called you a wife, but you made me carry a home by myself and call it marriage. I am not perfect, and I won't stand here and pretend I did everything right. But you didn't just lose a husband who wanted food on the table, you lost a man who wanted a partner. And by the time you noticed the dust in your own home, I had already found somewhere I didn't have to sweep to feel like I mattered." He reached for Maya's hand. "I'm sorry it came to this." And he walked out, leaving Cynthia standing there, exposed in front of strangers, in front of herself. The walk home that night felt longer than any road she had ever known. She stepped into the house, the same dirty room from the hook, the same clothes scattered across the floor, and for the first time, she truly saw it. Not as a mess she'd get to later, as evidence. She sat on the floor and cried, not because Daniel had left, but because she finally understood why. The next morning, something in Cynthia shifted. She woke before sunrise, tied a wrapper around her waist, and began to sweep the compound slowly, clumsily, like someone relearning a skill she had let waste away. She scrubbed the pots. She washed the clothes. By the time the sun rose fully, the house looked like a home again. That evening, she cooked real effort, real care, and waited by the door. Daniel came home late, glanced at the table, and said quietly, "I've already eaten." He walked past her into the room without another word. It stung. But Cynthia didn't give up. The next day, she woke even earlier. She boiled water and set it aside for his bath before he even stirred. She swept before the birds began to sing. She cooked again, and this time, without saying anything, she packed a portion into a small container and slipped it into his work bag before he left. Daniel didn't notice until lunchtime, when he opened his bag at the office and found it sitting there, quietly. He stared at it for a long moment. Then, without meaning to, a small smile broke across his face as he ate alone at his desk, but not quite as empty as before. Days turned into weeks. Cynthia's changes didn't stop, and she never announced them. She didn't do it for praise or attention. She did it because she had finally understood what her silence and laziness had cost her. Even on days she thought no one was watching, she kept sweeping, kept cooking, kept slipping meals into his bag, container after container, message after silent message. "I see what I lost, and I am trying to become someone worth staying for." One afternoon, Daniel sat at his desk, holding another container of jollof rice she had packed for him. Maya walked past and noticed his expression something softer than she'd seen in weeks. "You've been smiling at your lunch a lot lately," she said lightly. Daniel looked up. "My wife has been. Trying. Really trying. Not because I asked her to, just because she wants to." Maya said nothing more. She had seen enough change in people to recognize when someone's heart was slowly finding its way back home. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. The compound was swept clean. The smell of a well-cooked meal drifted from the kitchen. Cynthia stood there, nervous, unsure of what to expect, a woman who had spent weeks proving something without asking anything in return. Daniel looked around the house, really looked, and then at her. "You didn't stop," he said softly. "I won't," Cynthia replied, her voice trembling but sure. "I know I can't undo what I ignored, but I see it now, Daniel. I see everything I almost lost. Daniel walked further into the house, set down his bag, and for the first time in a long time, sat down at the table she had set for him. Then let's start again, he said, slowly, but together. Cynthia's eyes filled with tears, not of regret this time, but of quiet relief. Sometimes, the people who love us the most will keep showing up long after we've stopped putting in the work, but the patience is not endless, and love was never meant to replace effort. It was meant to inspire it. If you've followed us to this moment, please don't leave without hitting the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section so that we can know and welcome each other warmly.